Hello, BookTube. I have a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff I want to talk to you about on this cold, wet Friday in mid-April that started off with blinding snow conditions. The less said, the better. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about all the miscellaneous stuff I have to do, and I was thinking, I don't want to clog your video feeds with 10 videos about miscellaneous stuff. I thought that I had some sort of umbrella video like Bookish Rambles or Saturday Hodgepodge or Fresh Hill. There are a whole bunch of BookTube channels that have sort of umbrella catch-all video formats where they can just catch you up on all the stuff that's going on in their life, meant to emphasize the nature of this little corner of BookTube, which is mostly personal. Just personal amongst a whole bunch of book readers. And then I remembered that I have such a format on this channel. I haven't really used it in 2021. My MegaStuff videos are exactly that. So I've got the rad pad all fired up here, and I have a MegaStuff video for you today for this Friday. And I've grouped things according to general headings, just so I don't forget anything. And I made some notes, and also a couple of things I want to read you, just so that I don't leave anything out. And the first heading, as is only right, is me. Me. And the item under me that I want to mention is something that thrilled me to death when it happened. It happened this week. You might have seen me tweet about it, or maybe something on my Hoppin' Instagram, which is mostly just pictures of Frida. It was this week that I got on my doorstep the physical printed newspaper of smoke signals, Big Canoe News, in northern Georgia. A very small but beautifully designed print newspaper that comes out once a month, the beginning of every month. It's $30 a year. You get a lot for that. For that money, you get a lot. And in 2021, one of the things you get for that subscription price is yours truly as Big Canoe's book section editor. I am a print newspaper book section editor for the first time in forever. It's been an eon since that was true. And I knew that it was true for months. I've been working on my April and now my May section, having a ball, pulling all sorts of material together, aiming for what I consider to be not an irrational goal, which is to make Big Canoe's book section, although it might be small, every bit as good as the book's coverage of any other newspaper in the country. And I think my April issue did that, and I intend to have all the others do it as well. I knew already that this was true, but getting the print newspaper on the doorstep and opening it to see in print in three-dimensional reality that this was true added something. I don't know what it was, but it got to me. It was an amazing moment. So I will leave a link down below to Big Canoe News. It's a local Northern Georgia newspaper, but they have international coverage. They have lots of lively arts coverage, and they now have the best little book section anywhere in the country. And they don't paywall anything. So if you don't want to pay the $30 for a yearly subscription, you can just go and look at the digital version of the issue. Nothing's left out. So I'll leave a link to that down below. But that is the me section. And then we'll get to the world. And of course, there's been a lot happening in the world. But one little detail of American politics caught my attention, mainly because I was, I was very much paying attention to the news that it echoes. President Biden nominated a man named David Chipman to be head of the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And ordinarily, a departmental head, even for a branch as powerful as the ATF. The ATF is basically a civilian military that's a lot less accountable than the actual flag-waving military. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be any big deal, but Chipman was involved in the Waco raid, the raid on the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, in 1993. That will be before a lot of you were born. Of course, it was the year of my birth. I just have a wicked good memory. I have studied the Waco incident exhaustively. I've studied Ruby Ridge as well. Another incident that has always been characterized as a out of control private pseudo-religious militia running drugs or guns or both, abusing children into the mix, that the United States government had to repress. Ruby Ridge was famous. Waco was even more famous. And one of the reasons why Waco was famous is because the ATF didn't just go in guns blazing. They also brought in bulldozers and flamethrowers, some people say. I tend to agree. And wiped out the compound and killing almost everyone inside, including 24 children. This was Janet Reno's show. This was an enormously controversial subject in its day. I don't believe that the Waco question is really settled. I think every once in a while, this enormous, scaly monster that we're all riding on the back of sometimes ripples a little, and we can feel the monster underneath. We're not supposed to be able to do that, because the monster is invulnerable to anything except, as an old friend of mine used to say, all of us acting together. That's the thing, the only thing that it fears. And Waco was an incident that showed that monster. For a minute, the fur was stripped away and you could see the rippling flesh of the monster underneath. Somewhere along the line, the Branch Davidians in Waco depersoned, decitizened themselves to the powers that be in Washington, who control not only the military, but quasi-military organizations like the ATF. And they were wiped out with what anyone would have to call an excessive use of force. And there's a lot of leeway on the subject one way or another. It's a fascinating subject. I have heard rumors that there is a great book on the subject, a great revisiting of the subject coming out sometime soon, 2021, 2022. We shall see if that is true. I know that how difficult it is to get Freedom of Information Acts on a lot of the stuff connected with Waco. I know that for a fact. And David Chipman was connected with Waco. He was there on the ground. And in the intervening years, he has espoused a lot of weird lies about Waco. A lot of them. And they all tend in the same direction, that the Branch Davidians were this monstrously satanic evil cult, and that they were monstrously armed. Chipman has said multiple times that a couple of attack helicopters were shot down by heavy gunfire from the Branch Davidian compound. That absolutely did not happen. That is absolutely just a black and white lie. And he hasn't retracted it. He hasn't said I was mistaken. And that's not the only thing along those lines. The only kind of creepy thing he said. And I don't know how much attention this whole thing has garnered. Certainly the world has bigger things to concentrate on. But as someone who remembers the Waco incident and watched it day by day unfolding, I find it extremely unsettling that this guy is Biden's pick to head the ATF. I think he could have found a better candidate. And it makes me worried. It worries me. Because America is dealing in the 21st century with a whole lot more domestic armed organizations, separatist organizations, than it ever knew in the 1990s. And much as I might think those people are the scum of the earth, they still have rights. I don't know. I think it's on one level, if we weren't dealing with a revanchist nuclear Russia or a worldwide pandemic that's proving very stubborn to control, or a bunch of variants that have God knows what potential, if we weren't dealing with a whole bunch of stuff like that, I think more people might be paying attention to this choice. But it got to me. So that's my world thing. And in typical American fashion, the item that I put under the heading of the world involves the United States. Is there anywhere else in the world? I guess you could find some places. But then the next item is YouTube, but it once again involves me. You knew this when you signed on for this channel. I got an email. I get lots of emails. I get hundreds of emails a day. But I got an email that I wanted to share with you. I checked with the sender, and he's perfectly okay with me reading it out to you. I'm not going to identify him. But I want to chat about it just a bit. It got to me, so I want to read it out. Hi, Steve. I hope it's okay for me to write to you. I should add here as a parenthetical, it is always okay for you to write to me. If you write me an exam, if you send me a literature exam, here are 19 questions. What are your answers to them? Take a week if you want to. Or if you send me a Tolstoy short story, something 3,000 words long with maybe a point buried in the second to last paragraph, don't expect a quick reply. But you're always free to email me. I'll get to the point. I'm a 22-year-old young man, one of the, quote, famously aimless young men you've mentioned in your videos. I haven't watched all of your videos, but I've seen quite a few. Loved your Western Canon starter kit. Me and my friends have played your BroTube videos more than any others, where you analyze some of the many YouTube videos aimed at my demographic. I really like your recent Bro Watch videos. And I'm writing to ask you to continue them. You should continue holding some of these pro channels' feet to the fire. My whole age group needs to see that. That was an email that I got just the other day, and I want to point out two things about it. One, it's dirty pool. You knew that when you sent it, obviously, because the welfare of those famously aimless 20-something young men means a lot to me. I know it sounds hokey, but it's a serious subject to me, and it always has been. Long before Jordan Peterson thought of addressing that crowd to monetize it for personal wealth of staggering dimensions. Staggering dimensions. Back in 2016, 2015, sometimes as much as $300,000 or $400,000 a month. Staggering wealth. But long before he was talking about it or cared about it at all, long before he learned that was a golden goose that he could feed, I cared about this demographic. And in the 21st century, I've only cared about it more, as it has been more and more both abandoned and villainized. So this video is a little bit, or this email is a little bit of dirty pool, because of course it's going to get me going. And the second thing I want to say is that I am strongly considering. I made a feature called Bro Watch, not to be confused with Baywatch, the greatest TV show in the history of the world, where I take a BroTube video once a week or so and analyze it / rip it to shreds. And I want to keep doing that. I like the idea of that. This correspondent in later correspondence with me pointed out that he suspects that the reason that I haven't continued that feature every week is because it looks to me like the first time I did it generated a huge increase in subscribers on this channel in a matter of a few days. Hundreds in a matter of a few days. And this correspondent said, I bet that's the reason why you've eased off on it, because you don't want a huge increase in subscribers. And he called me weird because of that. He said he and his friends think that's weird. One way or another. I mentioned the video under the YouTube heading because it will force me to go out and follow the algorithm to find this stuff in order to bring it in and then brochet it. But I will do that. I will do that. I will resume my Bro Watch videos. I will think about it, find a subject / victim this weekend, and recommence those next week. So that was an email that I got, and it worked. Then the next heading will be BookTube. I want to keep these MegaStuff videos below 1 hour, so we're going to just move briskly along. The next subject is BookTube. And for BookTube, I want to talk about two things that cropped up in the course of, recent viewing. This isn't so much a last week in BookTube, but things that cropped up. First, two videos that were made about e-reading. Michael K. Vaughan and Rajathon both did videos about their Kindle and what they think about it, its pros and cons, et cetera, the way they've been living with it as they've had it as a device. And I'll leave links to both those videos. I love these kinds of discussions, especially since post-pandemic, almost all of my reading has migrated to electronic reading. Almost all of it has. I still get finished copies, and I need them. I'm still more comfortable reading and consulting a finished copy, for instance, in preparation for a review. But I now routinely, that is the exception and not the rule. I now routinely, when I'm on this couch or anywhere, our chair or the bed, I now routinely reach for a tablet to read on. I have a Kindle Paperwhite. Can you hear that? Can you hear that siren? Boy, through rain or sleet or driving hail, the sirens continue on this road. I have an e-reader. I got one with a case from Kindle and used it and liked it. But I have found that the thing that I really like, I mean, it's going to vary from person to person, but the e-reading experience that I really like is on a tablet. on a nice big graceful tablet. The rad pad is not all that graceful because it's wrapped in rubber and plastic. So it loses that sleek form and function in order to be much tougher. I could and have dropped this on the floor from shoulder height, and it doesn't hurt the machine at all on the inside. And I like that. I value that quite a bit. But like for instance, well, here's a an iPad that's charging. This is the type of thing that's more likely. This is an iPad 2. I have recently taken out my my iPad second generation and also my iPad first generation in order to charge them up again and go through my semi-annual routine of trying to find out whether or not I can make them usable. The original iPad, the answer is virtually no. Amazingly, it does still work as an e-reader. Kindle, iBooks, and Nook all work just fine on it because they are very low profile, very low energy uses. But virtually nothing else does. Email will refresh after a fashion, but apps like Instagram or YouTube don't work. Voxer doesn't work. That sort of thing. They don't even tend to work when I go at them, not as an app, but through Google. So I'm pretty sure that aside from a library of books, my original iPad is verging on worthless. Probably in 2021, I will stop reviving it. I will stop recharging it and just let it die a peaceful death where I don't bother it anymore. Although I think it's amazing that after 11 years, that it still comes on, it still works. I mean, when I pour power into that original iPad, I can go online after a fashion. I can read on the thing. It still swipes. It still refreshes. It's still got all sorts of controls in it. There are all sorts of minimal, very low function things that will still work on it, even after all this time. The iPad 2 is a very different story. The iPad 2 was a huge technological increase on the original iPad, and it is still very functional. So every once in a while I recharge that as well because I like having iPads all around me. They're so convenient. They're just so nice to have. It's just such a perfect little device. And I wanted to mention in response to those two videos, I wanted to sort of throw my hat in the ring and say, yes, I also love e-reading. I don't miss the inconveniences of printed books at all. I rejoice in the fact that they aren't there when in the e-reading experience. The device is right there. The books are all right there. Everything's searchable. My notes, my highlights and notes and comments can be made infinitely and sent out of the device to my email. That is certainly not true for any annotations I would make in a printed book, where not only would I be limited by the size of the margins or whatnot, but I would then have to find those annotations when I look in the book. I would have to find them and copy them out somewhere else. The printed book in that way is like a manual typewriter. What I do inside it goes nowhere. It's not shareable. And that's not true with ebooks. And I mention it mainly because the other day I did something that I told myself for a year I would not do. For a year, I said, well, okay, you're getting very comfortable reading ebooks. You read ebooks all the time, read ebooks all night long. And you're getting very used to the ecosystem of an ebook where you can call things up, where you can highlight things and make notes and whatnot. But don't let that carry over to books. Don't be one of those people. And yet it happened. The other day I was reading a print book and I got to a spot that I wanted, and without reaching for a pencil, I just ran my finger along the lines. And then after a second, I remembered, no, it's a printed book. It's a dead thing. It's not alive. It doesn't respond to your touch. So you have to get a pencil and make your annotations in there. And then when you're done with that, you have to remember where they are and write them out somewhere else. So I wanted to echo those two videos. It's not a Kindle, although I have a Kindle app on all of my tablets. I shift between iBooks and Kindle and Nook comfortably. I have different needs, different capacities, different libraries on all of those, and I shift between them, and that's no problem at all. So I wanted to add my 2 cents to that. I'll leave links to those videos. But there was another subject that came up on BookTube just recently that was much bigger than just people appreciating their Kindles. It was much more widespread, and that's the subject, an old subject for me, a subject that well predates YouTube, which is Objectivity and Subjectivity in Book Reviewing. I have been a book reviewer for a long time, and I have lost count of how many times I have said that to someone or disagreed with someone about a book they love or a book they're esteeming highly, only to have them say, well, it's all subjective, right? It's just your opinion. It's all subjective. I've lost count of how many times that happens. I've lost count of how many people I have had to quietly have garroted because they said that to me. And I was hoping for a little relief from that subject, but no. Michael Knipp made a video about subjectivity and objectivity in reviewing. It's infamous. I will leave a link to it down below. In the video, he said that the objective things that you can say about a book are its page count, its price, maybe a little bit about its author, and that's it. And then all the rest of it. Sentence effectiveness, vocabulary, imagery, consistency of characters, plausibility, and depth of plot. All of that is subjective. And as usual, when I heard those kinds of sentiments, my first reaction was, why don't you pick on somebody else's career? I am a book reviewer. If all that stuff was just loosey-goosey up in the air with everybody's opinion being as valid as everybody else's, I'd be out of a job. If those things really couldn't be analyzed objectively, I would be out of a job. But I know that it doesn't get anywhere to say things like that to someone, so I let it go. I mailed Michael Knipp a box of live scorpions and just went on with my day. I just put it behind me. But then it became a subject. It became, as the 21st century revoltingly says, a thing. Because Christy Lewis at Dostoevsky in Space, a friend of Michael's, made a video in which she rebutted that, in which she said, no, absolutely not. All the elements that you're talking about as being subjective can be objectively measured. You do it all the time yourself, and so does everybody else. Maybe not exactly objectively measured, but certainly in the larger scale of things. You can certainly look at the writing of one author and say it's better than the writing of another author. It was a wonderful video. I'll leave links to these all down below. One of the foremost ways that I could tell that Christy Lewis and Michael Knipp are friends happened in her video when she stopped and then yelled, "His video is full of lies." That's when I knew I was dealing with friends, and that's what I love about this little corner of BookTube. Needless to say, I agreed with her video, but that wasn't the end of the subject. People have taken that subject and ran with it. There are a whole bunch of videos, probably more than I know of. Pei at the channel Attention, who he really deserves a bigger following than he has. He brought it up, discussed it at great length, and I knew it was only a matter of time until old man Bookish decided to trundle himself up to his work table, turn on his video, and make a few winding thoughts about subjectivity and objectivity in reviewing. And he did. Brian at Bookish did. He did make a video. And he started his video in a way that has happened to me so many times I've lost count. This gambit, this particular gambit that people use when they are talking about this subject, he didn't just work his way up to it. He started with it. He started with a picture of two penguins, one drawn by John James Audubon and one drawn by one of his children when they were very young. A cartoonish, handprint penguin with bright clouds all around it that hangs on the refrigerator in his kitchen and is a subject of deep sentimental love. And when I see pictures like that, I know what's coming, and he didn't disappoint. On one level, of course, Audubon's penguin is more accurate, it's more dynamic, it more accurately conveys what a penguin looks like. But for sentimental reasons, for personal emotional reasons, for subjective reasons, in other words, my child's penguin has a firm place in my heart. Then he went on to discuss the whole matter of whether or not there are things in books, for instance, that can be critically assessed. Of course the answer to that question is yes. Of course the answer is yes. If you take Michael Knipp's line and say that all of that stuff is subjective, then your own preferences go out the window, and you are, as I have said many times before on this subject, completely invalidating the whole concept of talent. The whole concept of work goes right out the window. So why bother crafting your prose? Why bother working on revisions or drafts? Why bother venerating any authors as opposed to any other authors? If it's all subjective, if we are really groping in the dark and nobody has any idea what's good and not good, that is absolute nonsense. And yet this subject will not die. And I think I know why it won't die. I think I know why. It's because people confuse the objective assessment of art with the subjective assessment of its impact on you, or your subjective appreciation of it. And they think, mistakenly, that if a thing is objectively bad, then either you are wrong to subjectively love it, or you're bad to subjectively love it. There's something wrong there. If there's that disconnect, that is absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. It's not true in art. It's not true in anything else. You are totally entitled to your reactions, your appreciation of any kind of work of art or anything else, right? How many times have we heard, out in society, have we looked at some couple and heard people immediately say, I don't know what she sees in him? It's I imagine something that people looking at Brian and his lovely wife have said quite often. What I'm saying is, there's no accounting for taste. That phrase goes back a long time and has a reason for going back a long time. Your taste is entirely your own. It's not subject to criticism or mockery or snide dismissal. The people who criticize it or mock it or snidely dismiss it are themselves dismissible. They are snobs. Snobs are loathsome people. There's no reason for you to pay any attention to them, much less care what they say. But I think the reason why this subject keeps coming up is because people extrapolate from that, the inviolability of their own personal taste, to the objective standards of the thing they're forming their taste around. In the 21st century, it of course takes the form of entitlement, since that is the nature, the very defining essence of the 21st century, which is that if a young person looks at something and says, I like that, their next thought will be, if I like it, it must be great. And in the 21st century, the thought right after that will be, if I like it, it must be great, and you must like it too, or you're a Nazi. But we don't have to worry about that third part, just the first two. If I like it, it must be great, is false. I was railing about this when it came to the Harry Potter books 15 years ago, saying to young people at the time, okay, you love these books. You went to the midnight parties, you've read them over and over again, you organized your life around them, fine. That doesn't mean you get to have your parents get their lawyer to make your teacher teach it as part of an English literature course. It's not English literature, it's just a fun pop book that you like. That the fact that you like it doesn't cross the line, doesn't mandate that it is therefore objectively great, any more than the fact that you dislike something would make it objectively bad. If I say that I dislike something, you're perfectly free to disagree with me. If I say I dislike something and it's objectively bad, I will give my reasons, and your reasons had better be better than mine. I think that's the reason why this subject keeps coming up, because people confuse those two things. But one way or another, the subject wasn't done at all. Because I knew when Brian showed those two pictures in his video and said, my child's penguin is objectively far less good than Audubon's in every conceivable way. I have an emotional attachment to it. Subjectively, I like it more, but I do recognize that there are objective standards here and it doesn't meet any of them. I knew when he did that somebody was going to come along and say, no, in addition to your emotional attachment, it is better than the Audubon. It is objectively better than the Audubon. And sure enough, Hannah at Hannah's Books slogged back a quart of bathtub gin, strapped on her most fetching battle scarf, and made a video in which she essentially says that very thing. That your subjective appreciation of this much worse painting of a penguin makes it just as good or better. Now, there were nuances to her discussion, as there are to all of her discussions. Nuancy thinkers. I've been plagued with them my whole life. And I'm going to leave links to all of these things because this is a subject worth discussing. The fact that it goes back with me all the way to the Garden of Eden doesn't make it any less instructive to discuss. You should watch all these videos and come to your own conclusions, but I wanted to put my oar in the water and say, since I've been dealing with this subject for a long time, that of course a work of art can be objectively assessed. Michael Knipp is wrong. I think he was being playful. But he's completely wrong when he says the only objective things about it are its material dimensions. That isn't true. Not at all. you can read, for instance, a novel. Since we're on BookTube, that's the only thing we're talking about. But if you can read a novel and say, well, every other word here is a cliche, a lazy idiom of some kind or other. These characters are not developed. They do things for reasons that aren't expressed. The prose is flat. There's no conclusion. There's no dramatic arc. No characters ever change in good or bad ways. In other words, it's contemporary literary fiction. It's MFA fiction, one way or another. You can say that about that book, and then you can prove it. You can demonstrate those things. And as Hannah pointed out, that is not the be-all and end-all of reacting to a book. Obviously, it's not. And that's not the sum and total of what a book review, a book critic does. Michael Knipp's point was that you cannot possibly assess a work of art without a personal bias. That it's not possible to do. I disagree with that. But when he makes the subsequent point that reviewers import their own personal opinions, their own personal view of things into their review and can't help but not do it, he is correct. The point is that a reviewer is training. A reviewer has skill. A good reviewer, a long-time experienced book reviewer, will have a skill and a training that makes them better able to do that, better able to deal with their own biases, better able to channel them out of the review and concentrate on the things that they can show you, the things that might appeal to your biases, the things that are objectively good about the book. If you get to the point, through confusion of categories or insecurity or whatever, where you say that there is no way to say anything objective about a book, you're lost. You have invalidated the whole endeavor of writing if you do that. For instance, I just reread Return of the Native. Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy has a very famous bravura opening scene. It's famous for a reason, because it's astonishingly effective. It's incredibly beautiful. That is not a subjective reaction. I loved it. There are going to be plenty of people who don't love it, but even the people who don't love it are not going to be able to say it's poorly done, except in the 21st century, where if you don't like something, it's a Nazi. But in normal parlance, in the 1980s, when the world made sense, whether or not you like the opening to Return of the Native, you would still be forced to say this is amazingly well done. I've had to come to that awkward conclusion many times about many things that I've been reviewing, where I'm reading it and saying, okay, well, I don't like anything that you're doing here, but I have to acknowledge that it's well done. Or, I really like what you're doing here, but I have to acknowledge it's not very well done. I have to do that sort of thing all the time. And the reason why I have to do that thing all the time is because I have a lot of experience as a reviewer. That's why we go to nor rain, nor sleet, nor slush, nor snow. It doesn't matter. People are still going to try to cook their food on a hot plate on their bed. One way or another. You get my point. I don't want to beat this into the ground. I will leave links to all these videos down below. I just wanted to make sure to stick up for my own profession and say, if some new novel comes down the pike, here we have an example. If some new novel comes down the pike, I am perfectly able to assess it objectively. I can assess it subjectively as well, but I am perfectly able to assess it objectively. And although it's forbidden to say this sort of thing in the 21st century, because I have been doing that kind of objective assessing for a very long time, for some very demanding editors and some very demanding peers and readers, I'm really good at it. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It's a skill. You can build it like anything else. So if you are going... Am I going on too long, baby bee? If you're taking your it's all subjective, you can't possibly assess this from well-meaning but amateur reviews on places like Goodreads, maybe you ought to get out more. Maybe you ought to take a look at some of the really good professional reviewers who are out there who are doing it in a way that it should be done. Instead of emoting all over their review and then saying, well, here's how I sum up my emotions, one way or another. That was a little strand that ran through BookTube. Everybody's a critic. And then the only last thing that I want to end with here, I was worried this thing would go long, is my reading. Which a lot of you are going to say, next time you do a MegaStuff video, could you please make it all your reading and leave out the nattering about everything else? You just watch yourself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. as we used to say back in the 80s, when all the world made sense. But for reading, I jotted down a few things. I had a very good, like for instance, if we look back a week, I had a very good reading week. Uh, Paradoxically, because it was a large chunk of it was a very bad week where I was just feeling really terrible. So I wasn't really up for anything except laying flat on my back reading. Tablets were right there. Just prop them against a pillow or against the bean and read to your heart's content. No awkward page flipping, no nothing like that. I can read on one of these things while having the bean crooked under my chin, rubbing her belly. Don't need two hands to do it. But anyway, I had a very good reading week, very, very immersive, few surprises. And I wrote down a few things here that I want to talk to you about. I'm doing a very slow, methodical read-through of the Norton Anthology of English Literature. I got 2-volume Norton Anthology of English Literature at the Brattle last year, I think. I reinforced them. They're wonderful. The thin onion skin paper, elaborate notes, really good presentations of each one of these canonical works. And I just decided to start with page 1 of volume 1 and work my way through it. I'm continuing to do that and having a blast. Just having a blast doing that. Also, the novel Popisho. I don't know that I have it here. Do I have it? Oh. I do. I've got 2 enormous towers of things here because it's Friday. And I have the couch here, and I have my old footlocker is sort of a coffee table. It's the workstation here next to the couch. So I don't put things on the floor. It's just an old reflex because for 5 years, my old dogs urinated whenever they got the mood to do it. So if you left things on the floor, they were going to be destroyed. This dog wouldn't go in the house for all the tea in China. But it's an old reflex, so I pile things on the footlocker, and I just keep piling them all week. It's the weekend when I clear it off. And we're not there, so I've got this huge pile of stuff. But I've managed to free it. Popisho by Leonie Ross, which we saw just yesterday. I read it and loved it. Really loved it. I'm now sorry that I didn't get to the advanced copy faster than I did. I thought it was just terrific. So enjoyable. And so intensely human. I didn't read the advanced copy. Typically, in order to nail these things down critically, I will read them once and then read them again. I might have to reread this, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just, I'm not commissioned to review it anywhere, but it's terrific. What a reading experience. So I wanted to mention that. Also, can I free this thing up? They're both, this thing, Italian Days by Barbara Gazzuti Harrison. This is a very atmospheric, very detailed, calling it a travel log of a trip up and down the Italian peninsula is doing it a disservice. It's much, much more than that. And it's also much more than I remembered. When I dipped into it, just thought I'd read one chapter. I read the whole thing and was amazed at how much of the texture and the humor I had forgotten. Such a good book, such an amazing book. I'm going to reinforce it, and then it's going in the little book room, absolutely. And then the last thing is Buried. Okay, buried deep. There's no way I can get to it. But we saw it on this channel. It's the Penguin Book of modern American short stories. A disappointingly thin little thing that I broke my own usual rule with short story anthologies and read it front from back. Usually I don't. Usually I break it up. I go, I'll read the first story, then I'll go way in, read one, bounce all around, read the introduction, that sort of thing, rather than read it in a way that it's not meant to be read, which is just straightforward sequentially. But I did that anyway with this one. I really liked it. It's a really good short story anthology. The foremost way that I know that is because when it was over, I wanted it to be 3 times as long. And that means that is not me commenting about my love of short stories. This is not the Codex Cantina. Okay? That's not me commenting on my love of short stories. That's me commenting on the fact that I had that reaction when I was done with the anthology means I really like the editor. I think his name is John Freeman. I don't have the book. It's buried in a pile. But you saw it just the other day. That's what that reflects. It reflects that I really like his editorial vision. Not just for what goes in the anthology, but for where it goes in. What kind of reading rhythm you have. Whether it was him or somebody at Penguin paid attention to that. It was a terrific anthology. I strongly recommend it. And the sure way that I can demonstrate that is that when I was done with it, I wanted more. I wanted it to be longer. I'm not 100% convinced that all of the stories that were in it really deserved to be in it. Certainly there were fluctuations in the quality involved, but it's a keeper of a short story anthology. So that's sort of a thumbnail of my reading recently. There was a lot of other stuff, including a lot of really bad self-published stuff. The less said of, the better. And I saw a bunch of stuff, a bunch of books on BookTube, a bunch of books in the book review press that I made my equivalent of a TVR, where I make a list of things that I have to ask about, see if publicists still have a copy, see if I maybe can find a cheap copy to buy, that sort of thing. Huge list of those. So the reading goes on. The adventure continues. But that is a MegaStuff video for today. So this is 40 minutes long. I'm gonna review this before I post it, just to make sure that it's not just unbearable. But then, if it's okay, then I will post it, and I will make a mental effort to make sure that my next MegaStuff video is not 40 minutes long. God help us. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up at long last, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.